My little brother pointed at my uniform across a crowded mall and called my life pathetic, loud enough for strangers to stare. My parents quietly agreed. They all think I'm just the failure who never left retail, and they have no idea what I'm really about to do. My name is Daniel Hayes. I was 32 years old the night my little brother pointed at me across the polished tile floor of Westbridge Mall and laughed loudly enough for an entire food court to hear. "Look at you, man," he snorted, voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Still folding shirts for minimum wage. That's honestly kind of pathetic, Danny." I stood behind the register in my navy polo, the store logo stitched neatly over my heart, barcode scanner warm in my hand. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The smell of greasy fries and cinnamon pretzels drifted in from the corridor. Around us, Saturday shoppers flowed like a river of bags and noise. Inside, my jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. Outwardly, I just smiled the way I'd trained myself to smile. "Good to see you too, Josh," I said. Joshua Hayes, 28, white teeth, tailored coat, expensive watch catching the light every time he gestured. He loved gesturing. Right now he was gesturing at me like I was an exhibit. Beside him, his fiancée, Amelia, shifted awkwardly, clutching a glossy shopping bag. Two of his friends stood slightly behind them, scanning me up and down with that same amused curiosity. The way people look at a street performer or a menu they have no intention of ordering from. "You still at this place?" Josh asked, sweeping his arm across the store as if it were a crime scene. "Dude, we thought you'd at least be, I don't know, assistant manager by now." I heard one of his friends snicker. The customer I'd just rung up gathered her bag and left in a hurry, eyes flicking between us like she'd walked into a family argument, and in a way, she had. I took a breath, feeling the recycled air of the mall burn cold in my lungs. "I like it here," I said evenly. "It's steady." It was a half-truth, and I hated how small it sounded the moment it left my mouth. Josh rolled his eyes dramatically. "Come on, you're 32. You can't still be playing stock boy. Mom keeps telling people you work in retail, like it's a phase you're going to grow out of." He chuckled, then looked back at his fiancée. "Can you believe he has a degree and this is what he's doing?" Amelia gave me a strained smile. "Hi, Daniel," she murmured, like she was trying to soften it, but she didn't contradict him. I could feel my manager, Carla, watching from the fitting room entrance. I caught the edge of her anxious expression. She hated scenes on busy days. I hated them more. In that moment, staring at my own brother across a rack of discount hoodies, I realized just how deep the crack in our family had grown. On paper, I was the disappointment. The older son who never left town. The one you could find every day like clockwork somewhere on these marble floors. Folding, scanning, answering, "Can I help you find anything?" What almost no one in my family knew, not my parents, not Josh, not even Carla, was that every evening when I closed the register and clocked out, I walked upstairs, past the food court, past the movie theater, and into an office with tinted glass that overlooked this entire complex. My name wasn't stitched on my polo up there. It was typed on the deed. Daniel Hayes, sole owner of Westbridge Mall. But that afternoon, as Josh laughed and called my life pathetic, the only thing visible to him was a price tag gun hanging awkwardly from my belt. "Do you need something?" I asked, keeping my voice calm, because if I let the anger bleed through, he'd just grin and push harder. He shrugged. "We're just here to grab some stuff. Thought we'd say hi to the family mascot." His eyes flicked to my uniform. "Hey, actually, maybe you can hook us up with an employee discount? Might as well get something out of you working here, right?" His friend barked a laugh. Amelia looked down at her shoes. I swallowed, forcing my fingers to stay loose around the scanner. "That's not how it works," I said. "And even if it were, I'm not risking my job for your sneakers." "Relax, man." His smile soured at the edges. There it was, that flash of contempt I knew too well. "It's just a joke. You don't have to be so sensitive. I'm trying to help you. Maybe if you stopped being so stubborn and actually listened to me for once, you'd be doing more with your life." He said it so casually, like offering unsolicited life advice to the brother he hadn't seen in months was some kind of gift. Behind him, a group of teenage girls drifted by, giggling. A kid with ice cream smeared on his face stared at us as his mother tugged him along. The mundane bustle of the mall marched on, oblivious to the storm building in my chest. I thought back to the last Thanksgiving at my parents' house, my mother fussing with the good china, my father pouring Josh another generous glass of red while they all listened to his latest big deal story. "And what about you, Daniel?" my aunt had asked that night, eyes hopeful. "Any promotions on the horizon?" I remembered my mother's quick, tight smile as she answered for me. "He's still at the mall," she'd said, the words still hanging heavy over the table. "Retail, but at least it's honest work." She'd said honest, the way people say, "bless his heart." That was the moment I knew they had all made up their minds about me, about what my value was, about how my story was going to go. Still it stung, standing there in that over-air-conditioned store while my brother infantilized me like I was a teenager refusing to move out of the basement. "Josh," I said quietly, "I'm working. Do you mind not doing this here?" He leaned his elbows on the counter like I was a bartender, and he was settling in for a long rant. "That's the problem with you," he said. "You're always hiding in this mall, hiding from your potential, hiding from real life. You could be in finance, real estate, something that actually matters." Finance, real estate. The irony made my mouth almost twitch. In another life, maybe I would have laughed and invited him upstairs, told him to pick any conference room he liked so we could have this discussion properly, showed him the spreadsheets with his own condo lease number buried somewhere in the tenant ledger. In this life, I just tapped a few buttons on the register and pretended to be checking inventory. The truth was, I could have told my family everything years ago. I could have explained how, right after college, when other people were chasing job titles, I'd been chasing floor plans and zoning laws instead. How I'd bought the struggling half-vacant Westbridge Mall for what people in the industry later called a suicide price. How I'd spent a decade clawing it back from the brink. How the rent checks from these stores, the sponsorship deals, the leases for every kiosk and billboard and food court stall, that was my salary. But every time I'd tried to picture telling them, something inside me went cold. Because they hadn't cared when I was staying up until 3 a.m. working 2 jobs to make the down payment. They hadn't cared when I lived out of a studio apartment with a mattress on the floor and a single pot in the kitchen. They hadn't cared when I first took out the loan, when everyone told me I was crazy to buy a dying shopping center in a town nobody cared about. They only cared now that Josh had a glossy LinkedIn profile and I still wore a name tag. I wanted to see, just once, who loved me when I had nothing to show them, who respected me when they thought I was just a retail worker, who saw me as more than the sum of my job title. So I'd kept my mouth shut, and now my silence was coming back to choke me. Josh checked his watch theatrically. "Anyway, we've got reservations at that new Italian place downstairs. You know, the one with the real linen napkins." He smirked. "You should come by after your shift, if they let you in with that shirt." His friend snorted. Carla cleared her throat pointedly across the store. I forced my lips into something that might pass for a smile. "Enjoy your dinner." He hesitated, like he was waiting for me to snap, to defend myself, to beg even. When I didn't, he shrugged and turned away. "Come on, babe," he said to Amelia. "Let's go spend some real money." They walked out, Josh's voice already booming as he complained loudly about the parking and how this place never changes. My place. I watched him go, my chest tight, my fingers buzzing with the effort it took not to slam something. Behind me, Carla approached quietly. "You okay?" she asked. I exhaled slowly, letting my shoulders drop. "Yeah, sorry about that." She studied me for a second, then shrugged. "Families," she said simply. "Shelf 3 needs straightening when you get a sec." I nodded. Shelf 3. Jeans. Easy. Something small and concrete and absolutely within my control. As I walked over, the familiar rhythm of retail work, fold, stack, straighten, smile, wrapped around me like a worn blanket. It was a rhythm I had chosen, whether my family believed that or not. But as my hands moved automatically, my mind was far from the neatly folded denim. It was upstairs, 2 floors above us, in a quiet office where my name was just a name, not a punchline. With my lawyer's voice echoing in my ear, "You know, you don't have to hide this from them forever, Daniel." And my own doubt answering back, "But what if I do?" I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always the brother people mocked at holidays. There was a time when Josh and I had been inseparable, when we'd raced our bikes up and down our street until our mother called us in for dinner, when he'd followed me into every treehouse, every creek, every stupid idea I had. I taught him to ride without training wheels. I covered for him when he sneaked out in high school. I helped him with college application essays while I was already drowning in my first job. But somewhere along the line, somewhere around the time I chose to stay and he chose to leave, our paths had stopped running parallel. Our parents started introducing him as our son Joshua. He works in finance, real corporate stuff, and me as Daniel, he's around, at the mall. They'd meant well, I told myself. They were proud of us in different ways, but different hurt more each year. There was one night I'd never forget, the night I told them I'd bought Westbridge. We were sitting at the kitchen table. The house still smelled faintly of my mother's lasagna. A football game murmured from the living room. Josh was home for the weekend, already half on his phone, scrolling. I did something big, I'd said, trying and failing to keep the excitement out of my voice. I bought them all. I remember the way my father's fork clinked against his plate as he looked up, startled. What? Westbridge, I'd said. They were going to sell it off in pieces. The bank was done. I got a deal. It's a lot of debt, but the numbers work if I can get occupancy up. I have a plan. Silence. Then my mother laughed, the kind of small, nervous laugh she used when she thought someone was telling a joke in poor taste. Daniel, she'd said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. You? Owning a mall? Don't be ridiculous. My father shook his head slowly. That's not a joke you should make, he muttered. People lose their homes when they gamble with property like that. I'm not gambling, I'd insisted. I've been working with a partner, with a lawyer. What partner? My father snapped. What lawyer? Are you in trouble? Josh looked up from his phone just long enough to smirk. Dude, is this because you're bored folding shirts? There are easier ways to get out of retail than buying the whole damn mall. I'd tried to show them the binder I'd put together. Valuation reports, projected cash flow, renovation budgets. My father flipped through 2 pages, then closed it with a sigh. You always did get these big ideas, he'd said. Remember when you wanted to start that online thing? How long did that last? 6 months. He pushed the binder back toward me. You're not a businessman, son. Get your head out of the clouds. Keep your job. Save your money. Leave that stuff to people who know what they're doing. People like Josh, he didn't say out loud. He didn't have to. The conversation had ended there. The binder had gone back into my bag. So had the words I'd wanted to say. A month later, the sale went through anyway. I moved my office into a windowless box on the 3rd floor, right next to the maintenance closet. I met every tenant, one by one. I renegotiated leases, added pop-up shops, convinced a national coffee chain to take a chance. I spent nights crawling under escalators and days talking to city planners. I learned every inch of this building until I could walk it with my eyes closed. I stopped bringing it up at family dinners. When they asked how work was, I said busy. When they asked if I was still at the store, I said yeah. When they told me I was wasting my potential, I said nothing at all. Now Josh was getting married. There was going to be an engagement dinner, a rehearsal dinner, a big, glittering wedding. My parents were over the moon. My mother had spent an hour on the phone gushing about the venue. They booked that new ballroom in the city. Can you believe it? She'd said. 6-course meal, Daniel. White tablecloths. You should see the photos. This is the kind of thing you could learn from your brother, Planning, ambition. He's really going places. I'd held the phone to my ear, staring at the framed blueprint of Westbridge on my office wall. Yeah, I'd said. He sure is. The problem wasn't that my brother had a different career. The problem wasn't that my parents were proud of him. He'd worked hard too. He deserved some of that spotlight. The problem was that somewhere along the way, they'd stopped seeing me at all. To them, I was the context around Josh's success, the contrast that made him look brighter, the dependable mall brother, the retail safety net, the guy who would help mom carry the groceries when everyone else flew home. And because I'd kept my ownership quiet, because I'd wanted to know who would stay when they thought I was small, they had all settled into a story where I never got to be anything else. Standing in that store, watching Josh's back disappear into the crowd, I realized something. My experiment had run its course. They'd shown me exactly who they were. The question was what I was going to do about it. The question sat with me the rest of the shift like a stone in my shoe. What was I going to do about it? I went through the motions, straightened shelf 3, helped a teenager find her size, smiled at a tired mother wrestling a stroller and 3 shirts she clearly didn't have the patience to choose between. My body was on autopilot. My mind was 2 floors up. When my break came, I told Carla I was heading to the staff room. Instead, I walked out into the main corridor, blending into the stream of weekend shoppers, and rode the escalator past the food court. Noise hit me first, frying oil, clinking trays, the overlapping buzz of 100 conversations. The place was packed. Good. Saturdays like this kept the numbers pretty. I slipped behind a service door near the movie theater, swiped my badge, and stepped into the quieter back hallway that only staff used. The air changed here, cooler, tinged with printer toner and stale coffee instead of perfume and pretzels. A few turns, another key card, and I was in my office. It wasn't glamorous. I had deliberately kept it that way. A mid-sized room with beige walls, an aging desk, 2 filing cabinets, a couple of chairs for meetings, and a big whiteboard covered in scribbles about occupancy rates and seasonal events. The fancy glass corner office with designer furniture was leased out to a marketing firm that paid above market rate. Let them have the Instagram backdrop. I preferred numbers. Through the narrow window, I could see a sliver of the parking lot, the winter sun glinting off rows of cars. Down below, somewhere among them, was Josh's shiny Lexus. My phone buzzed. A calendar reminder. Tenant review, 3 p.m., right? Real life didn't pause just because my brother had taken a dump on my self-respect. I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up the dashboard for Westbridge. Colored graphs filled the screen. Occupancy, 94%. Food court revenue, up 12% year over year. Holiday event bookings, nearly full. The mall that everyone had written off as a corpse a decade ago was humming, because of me. I zoomed in on the leasing schedule. A new pop-up sneaker store had just signed a short-term agreement on the first floor. I'd negotiated that myself last week. Josh would probably shop there sooner or later, never guessing his rent checks landed in my account. The irony tasted bitter, not sweet. A knock sounded on the open doorframe. "Hey, boss," a familiar voice said. I looked up. Lena Torres stood there, tablet in hand, curly hair pulled into a messy bun. Lena was my property manager, my right hand. She knew almost everything about the building and a carefully measured amount about me. "Food court manager wants extra security next Friday night," she said, stepping inside. "College promo thing. They're expecting a crowd. I told them we'd approve, but it'll cut into their margin." "Yeah, approve it," I said. "Better to pay for an extra guard than deal with a brawl over half-priced chicken wings." She smirked. "From your lips to the spreadsheets." Her eyes flicked over my face, her expression softening. "You okay? You look like you lost an argument with a freight elevator." I hesitated, then shrugged. Ran into my brother downstairs. "Oh," she made a sympathetic face. She'd heard enough over the years to fill in the rest. "How'd that go?" "About how you'd expect." I rotated my chair, staring at the occupancy chart instead of her. "He brought friends this time. Upgraded the audience for the humiliation." Lena leaned against the doorframe. "Want me to have security accidentally boot his car from preferred parking next time he shows up?" I gave a humorless laugh. Tempting. She watched me a moment longer. "You know, you don't have to keep doing this double life thing. You could work from up here full time. Hire someone else to deal with shoplifters and coupon ladies." "I know. Do you?" She raised a brow. "Because from where I'm standing, rich mall owner works part-time retail for fun is one thing. Rich mall owner lets his family act like he's a failure because he won't correct the record is something else." I closed the laptop with a soft click. "I told them once," I said quietly. "When I first bought the place. You know how that went." "Yeah, but that was 10 years ago. You had more debt than sense back then." "Thanks." She smirked again, then sobered. "You've proven yourself since. You could roll into any bank in this state and they'd name a conference room after you. Your brother's still measuring life in LinkedIn endorsements." "It's not about impressing them," I said. "I just wanted to see who they were when there was nothing to gain." "And now you've seen." She tilted her head. "So what are you going to do?" There it was again, the same question that had lodged in my brain on the sales floor. I rubbed a hand over my face. "There's an engagement dinner coming up," I said. "For Josh. Mom keeps sending me texts about it. They're acting like it's the royal wedding." "Restaurant in the city, right?" Lena asked. She mentioned it when I ran into her at the florist last week. I blinked. "You ran into my mom?" Lena shrugged. "Small town. She was picking centerpieces. Told me all about the groom's successful career and how lucky his fiancée is. I think she forgot I work for you." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Yeah, that sounds about right." "So you going?" she asked. "I guess I have to." The thought made my stomach twist. If I don't, it'll just be more proof that I'm the problem child. Or, Lena said slowly, it could be an opportunity. I knew that tone. It was the "I have an idea" tone that had led to some of our best events and a few near disasters. "What kind of opportunity?" I asked warily. "Where's the dinner being held?" she asked. "Someplace called La Terrazza," I said. "Why?" Her grin widened. "You mean La Terrazza on level 2 with the overpriced risotto and those tiny chairs that make grown men look like they're sitting at a kid's table?" I blinked. For a second, I forgot that little detail. Of course, the restaurant was in my mall. I'd read the lease. I'd approved the renovations. I'd given them a rent discount on the condition that they host at least 3 mall-wide events per year. I'd been so focused on the humiliation side of the equation, I'd forgotten the other half of the math. Lena's eyes sparkled. "You realize they're throwing this big, fancy, look at our son, we raised him right party in a space you own, right?" "Apparently I compartmentalized that part," I muttered. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Danny, I'm not saying you pull some Bond villain stunt and shut off the lights mid-toast, but if there was ever a natural moment to stop hiding, that might be it." The image flashed, unbidden. Josh at the head of a long table, basking in praise, gesturing dramatically as he told some story about corporate life. My parents glowing with pride. Me at the far end, sipping water, invisible. And then, somewhere in the middle of his speech, someone from the restaurant or mall management, Lena, maybe, walking over to quietly ask, "Excuse me, Mr. Hayes, could we get your input on something?" In front of everyone. The thought both thrilled and terrified me. "I don't know," I said. "It feels petty, like showing off." "Is it showing off to answer a question truthfully?" Lena asked. "You're not lying to them right now exactly, but you're also letting them believe a version of you that isn't real. At some point, that stops being humble and starts being masochistic." I stared at her. "You talk like a therapist sometimes," I said. "Property manager, therapist, unpaid life coach. It's all in the job description." She pushed off the door frame. "Think about it. We've got 2 weeks before the dinner, right? Plenty of time to plan something elegant. Or you can do nothing and let your brother keep treating you like the mall elf. Your call." When she left, the office felt smaller. I opened my email. 3 new messages from my mother, all with subject lines full of exclamation marks. "Can you switch shifts for the dinner?" "Dress code." "Seating arrangement. Need your height." I clicked the most recent one. "Daniel, just talked to Josh about the rehearsal dinner. He said you're still working weekends at the mall. I really wish you'd find something with better hours, but that's a conversation for another time. Can you ask your boss to change your schedule for Friday? The dinner is at 6. We want you there on time, not running in late in your work clothes. Also, dress code is semi-formal. Don't wear one of your polo shirts. This is important for your brother. Don't embarrass him. Love, Mom. P.S. They're having it at that beautiful new Italian place in the mall. Isn't that nice? You must know it from working there. Maybe you can help them with directions." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Don't embarrass him. It wasn't even malicious. I knew that. In her mind, she was being practical, helpful. She had no idea those sentences sliced me open more cleanly than anything Josh had said out loud. I replied with 2 words, "I'll be there." I didn't trust myself to type anything else. The next 2 weeks blurred into end-of-year chaos. Holiday displays went up. Santa took over the atrium. Kids screamed on the little train that circled the fountain. Retail sales spiked. Maintenance call-outs doubled. I split my time between my office and the store. Downstairs, I broke up arguments over coupons, restocked shelves, and calmed a man who was convinced the mannequins were looking at him funny. Upstairs, I argued with a contractor about snow removal budgets and approved a marketing campaign for Midnight Madness on Black Friday. At night, when the mall emptied out and the cleaning crew's vacuums echoed in the corridors, I walked the floors alone, past the shuttered storefronts, the silent escalators, the darkened food court. Here, without the noise, I could see the bones of the place, the work I'd poured into it, new flooring where old tiles had cracked, fresh paint where there'd once been water damage. A third of the units had been empty when I bought it. Now there were only 3 vacancies, and 2 of those had signed letters of intent. Every bench, every planter, every Christmas garland, my decision. I paused outside La Terraza one night. The restaurant was closed, chairs up on tables, flickering light from the kitchen, the only sign of life. Through the glass, I could see the long table they'd set up for a corporate event earlier. White cloth, polished silverware, tiny candles in glass holders. In 2 days, that table would host my entire family. I tried to imagine myself walking in, just another guest. Josh would probably clap me on the back, offer a toast to his hard-working big brother, in that tone that made it sound like a consolation prize. My mother would whisper last-minute instructions about my tie. My father would ask if I'd thought any more about getting a real job. The thought made my stomach churn. "Evening, Mr. Hayes." I turned. Marco, the restaurant manager, stood in the doorway, holding a stack of menus. "Sorry," I said. "Didn't mean to loom." He smiled. "You can loom wherever you want. You pay the mortgage for the loomed-upon space." He glanced past me into the dining room. "We're set for Friday. Your mother came by again to triple-check the seating. She's very organized." I groaned. "I bet she is." Marco hesitated. "She seems very proud of your brother. Talks about him a lot." He studied my face. "Are you sure you don't want us to do anything special for you? A separate toast? A menu note? We can be subtle." "No," I said quickly. "No spotlights. Just run the evening like a normal booking. If anything needs deciding, send for me quietly. No theatrics." He nodded. "As you wish. But for the record," he added, "if my family treated me the way yours seems to, I'd be tempted to comp everyone's dessert just so I could be the one signing the 0 on the bill." I laughed despite myself. "You're not wrong." The night of the dinner arrived cold and clear. I spent the day in the store, the familiar work strangely grounding. When my shift ended at 4, I clocked out, changed in the staff room into the one suit I owned that still fit properly, and headed upstairs. The mall looked different in a suit. People moved out of my way more. Security nodded with a touch more respect. It was ridiculous how much fabric could change a reaction. La Terraza's entrance glowed warm against the polished hallway. Fairy lights tangled along the archway, the murmur of conversation spilling out. A hostess with a tight bun and a black dress smiled as I approached. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "Hayes," I said. "Family party." Her smile brightened. "Of course, Mr. Hayes. Right this way." For a second I wondered which Mr. Hayes she thought I was, the landlord or the underachieving older son. My question was answered when we rounded the corner and my mother rushed toward me, napkin already in hand as if she expected to fix something. "Daniel," she whispered, eyes scanning my suit critically. She adjusted my tie without asking. "You made it. And on time. Good. Josh was worried you'd be late." Of course he was. Behind her, the long table was nearly full. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in months. Josh sat near the center, Amelia beside him, her engagement ring catching the candlelight. He looked up as I approached, that familiar smirk tugging at his mouth. "Look who found the elevator," he said loudly enough for the nearest half of the table to hear. "Big man from retail is here." A few people chuckled obligingly. I took my seat near the far end, the designated safe zone for someone they weren't quite sure how to brag about. My mother bustled back to her place, already telling someone about the seating chart drama like it had been a NATO negotiation. I listened as the conversation flowed around me. Josh talked about his latest project at the firm, throwing around words like derivatives and client portfolio with relish. My father asked him pointed questions that let him drop just enough humble brag details. At one point, my aunt leaned across Jonah, one of our cousins, to ask me, "And you, Daniel? How's the mall? Still busy?" I smiled politely. "Yeah, holiday rush. Keeps us on our toes." That's nice, she said, already turning back to hear the end of Josh's story about a difficult client who'd called him at midnight. You always liked Christmas. I cut my steak into careful pieces, each slice a small act of restraint. I had chosen this, I reminded myself. This invisibility. This is what happens when you let people believe the smaller version of you. But Lena's voice poked at me from the back of my mind. At some point, that stops being humble and starts being masochistic. I sipped my water, eyes drifting toward the bar where Marco was supervising a server ferrying wine bottles. He caught my eye, raised a brow in silent question. Ready? I wasn't, not really. But I also knew that if I walked out of this dinner having said nothing, I would keep replaying every laugh at my expense for months, years. Marco nodded subtly, then disappeared into the back. Josh clinked his fork against his glass, standing up, smile wide. All right, he said, voice booming just like it had in the store. Before we get to dessert, I just want to say a few words. Of course he did. Everyone quieted. Even the restaurant's background music seemed to hush. I set my glass down, my heart thudding. If something was going to change, it would have to be soon. Josh lifted his glass, the crystal catching the candlelight. So, he began, smiling down the length of the table. I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. It means a lot to me and Amelia that you all came out to celebrate us. We've worked really hard to get where we are, and we couldn't have done it without our amazing families. Polite murmur of approval. Someone dabbed at their eyes. My mother beamed. Josh continued, enjoying the way everyone watched him. When I first moved out to the city, he said, I didn't know if I was going to make it. New firm, new expectations. But, I've always believed that if you put in the hours and refuse to settle, you'll end up where you're meant to be. His eyes drifted toward me, just for a fraction of a second. I felt the weight of it. Not everyone gets that, he added casually. Some people are comfortable staying where they are, and that's fine. The world needs all kinds, right? A few chuckles. But I'm just grateful I pushed myself, that I aimed a little higher. My fork tightened in my hand. My mother shifted uneasily, as if sensing the line he was towing, but she didn't stop him. I mean, look at this place, he said, gesturing around. La Terrazza, top-rated Italian in the county. Our firm books tables here for clients all the time. This is the kind of life I dreamed about when I was a kid, and now I get to share it with all of you. He raised his glass a little higher. To ambition, to not settling, to taking risks and... Excuse me, Mr. Hayes? The interruption came from my right. Marco stood there, in his black vest and white shirt, holding a leather folder. Behind him hovered Lena, dressed in a simple black dress instead of her usual blazer, hair tamed into something approximating formal. A tiny spark of panic flared in my chest. I hadn't asked her to be here. Josh lowered his glass, annoyed. Can this wait? He said. I'm in the middle of... Apologies, Marco said smoothly. I meant Mr. Hayes. His eyes flicked to me, and he angled his body so more of the table could see where he was looking. We need your signature regarding the fire alarm inspection forms for the East Wing. The inspector is here tonight and says it can't wait if we want to keep all our permits in order. My father frowned. Fire alarms? Why would you bother him with that during a family dinner? Because, sir, Marco said, still polite, the mall owner's authorization is required. The word landed like a dropped plate. Owner. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Clinking and chatter from other tables filled the silence at ours. My father turned slowly. The mall what? The owner, Marco repeated, glancing at me with that question again. Now? Are we doing this? Mr. Hayes has to sign the compliance documents. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the inspector says it's either tonight or we reschedule the entire section. That means closing 3 stores tomorrow. He was insistent. Lena stood just behind him, expression neutral, but I could see the spark in her eyes. She wasn't here by coincidence. She'd orchestrated this with Marco, just like she'd hinted. Every eye at the table was on me now. Even the server had frozen with a tray of bread halfway to setting it down. My heart hammered. My palms were slick. For 10 years I'd chosen the quieter road. Tonight that road had dead-ended. I set my napkin down carefully and stood. It's okay, I said to Marco. I can sign. Josh let out a short, incredulous laugh. Since when do you sign anything related to the mall? He scoffed. You can't authorize a lunch break without your manager's permission. A few people tittered awkwardly. Marco cleared his throat. Sir, he said, addressing Josh now. With respect, your brother is my landlord. That word landlord seemed to echo. My aunt's mouth fell open. My mother's hand flew to her chest. Amelia looked from me to Josh, eyes wide. My father's face went blank in that specific way it did when his brain was scrambling to catch up with a reality it didn't like. What are you talking about? He asked slowly. Our Daniel works in a clothing store. He's staff. Lena took a small step forward, tablet in hand. Her voice was calm, professional. Mr. Hayes, she said, looking at my father but using my last name the way she always did upstairs. Your son Daniel purchased Westbridge Mall 10 years ago. We manage it with him. All tenants, including La Terrazza, lease from his company. A hush dropped over the table, heavy and total. I could feel heat creeping up my neck. There it was, naked in the air. The thing I'd hidden, the thing I'd minimized even to myself. My mother looked like someone had just switched her wine for vinegar. That can't be right, she whispered. Danny? I met her eyes, then my father's, then Josh's. It's right, I said. My voice surprised me. It sounded steady. I own them all. Josh actually laughed, a short barking sound. That's ridiculous, he said, glancing around as if expecting everyone else to join in. You can barely manage a shift swap. Lena tapped her tablet. Daniel Hayes, sole member of DH Properties, LLC, she said, as if reading off a script. Owner of record for Westbridge Shopping Center, as per county registry. I can pull the public record if you'd like, but we do have a tenant waiting on those signatures. Her tone was polite, almost apologetic, but the facts were a hammer. Aunt Carol's fork slipped from her fingers and clattered against her plate. My father turned to me fully now, his eyes searching my face as if he could find some sign this was a prank. You bought the mall? He asked. With what money? With Grandpa's, slipped through my head, but I didn't say it. That wound was older. Combination of a bank loan and investors at first, I said. Paid that off 8 years ago. The rents cover the rest. My mother shook her head slowly, as if reality were a snow globe she could turn over and watch the pieces resettle into a more familiar pattern. You told us you worked in retail, she said. All this time, you let us think. You assumed, I said gently. Then, because the moment was already broken beyond repair, I added, and I didn't correct you. Why? She whispered. It was the question I'd been asking myself in 100 ways. I looked down the table, at my family, still frozen, at Josh, his mask cracking. Because when I first told you I'd bought it, I said, you laughed. You told me to stop dreaming. You told me to keep my head down and leave that stuff to people who knew what they were doing. I decided it was easier to work quietly than convince you I wasn't crazy. My father's face colored. He remembered. I could see it. Josh recovered enough to scoff again. Okay, let's just say this is true, he said quickly. Why the hell are you still folding shirts? You own the building, apparently. Why slum it on the floor? Because I like it, I said, shrugging. Because it keeps me grounded. Because I learn more about what's really happening in my own property working 3 shifts a week than I ever would staring at reports. I let my gaze slide to him. And because my job title doesn't define my value. The jab landed. I saw it in the flinch at the corner of his eye. Marco, sensing this was no longer his scene, cleared his throat. If you'd like, Mr. Hayes, he said quietly, we can step aside for your signature and then I'll leave you all to your evening. I nodded and took the folder from him. I'll sign here, I said. No need to make a thing of it. I flipped to the flagged pages, scrawled my name where indicated, the pen scratching loud in the silence, and handed the folder back. Thank you, Marco said. His gaze flicked once more around the table, a mixture of curiosity and respect. Then he bowed slightly and retreated, Lena following. As she passed behind me, she squeezed my shoulder briefly. It was like someone had pressed a warm coin into my palm. I sat back down. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, because he couldn't help himself, Josh found his footing. Congratulations, I guess, he said, voice tight. That's surprising, but also kind of insane that you kept that from us, from your own family. The word insane came out sharper than he probably meant, or maybe exactly as sharp as he meant. I met his glare. Is it more insane than standing in front of a crowded store and calling your brother pathetic for working retail? I asked quietly. More insane than telling anyone who will listen that he's wasting his life, when you don't actually know anything about that life? His jaw tensed. "I was trying to motivate you," he said. "No," I said. "You were trying to elevate yourself. There's a difference." My mother gave a small, panicked laugh. "Boys, please. This is supposed to be a happy night. Can we not fight in front of everyone?" I took a breath. I could have swallowed it, smoothed it over, let them pretend. But something in me had shifted the moment I said, "I own the mall," out loud. I turned slightly so I was speaking to the table, not just to Josh. "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said. "Josh, I'm happy for you. Really. You've built a career you're proud of. You're marrying someone you love. That's wonderful. You deserve tonight." I looked at Amelia. She still watched me cautiously, like you watch a wild animal you're not sure will bolt or bite. "But I need you all to understand something," I continued. "For years, I've listened to jokes about my job, about my still working at the mall life. I've sat through dinners where my work was treated like a phase I'd eventually grow out of. I let it slide because I told myself it didn't matter, because I knew the truth." My throat tightened. I pushed through it. "But it does matter when your own brother calls you pathetic, when your parents feel the need to warn you not to embarrass the successful son by showing up in your work clothes. It matters when the people who are supposed to know you best reduce you to a punchline." Silence, thick and uneasy. A cousin shifted in his seat. My aunt stared at her plate. My father cleared his throat. "No one meant to hurt you," he said gruffly. "You know your mother talks without thinking, and your brother, he jokes too much." "That's exactly the point," I said. "You didn't mean to, but you did, and you never stopped to ask if maybe your assumptions were wrong. If maybe I was choosing my life, not failing into it." My eyes flicked to Josh. "You never asked me why I stayed. You just decided staying was failure." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. For once, he didn't have a comeback ready. My mother's eyes were shiny now. Her voice, when it came, was small. "Why didn't you tell us?" she whispered. "After it started working, after you paid off the debt, why keep pretending?" I swallowed. This was the part I hadn't admitted even to myself. "Because I wanted to see if you'd respect me when you thought I was ordinary," I said. "I wanted to know if you loved me without a fancy description you could trot out at parties. If you'd listen to me when I didn't have leverage or money to offer." I let the words hang there. And now I do know. The flip side of that truth was heavy. My mother covered her mouth. A tear slid out anyway. My father stared at the tablecloth, knuckles white around his fork. Josh shook his head stubbornly. "So this is my fault? You're the one who lied," he snapped. "You're the one who played some long-con social experiment on your own family. That's messed up, Dan." There it was, his defense. Offense. I sighed. "I didn't lie," I said. "I said I worked at the mall. That was true. I said I worked in retail, also true. You all filled in the rest. And as for messed up, maybe it was. I'm not proud of how long I let it go." I looked straight at him. "But can you honestly say, if you'd known 10 years ago that I'd bought this place, that you would have treated me the same way you did last week, in front of your friends?" His mouth opened, shut. For a second I saw the kid he used to be, the one who'd cried when he scraped his knee and came running to me instead of Mom. "No," he muttered finally. "Probably not." Honesty, begrudging but real. "And that," I said softly, "is why I didn't tell you." For a long moment, all I could hear was the clink of dishes from another table. Then my aunt, bless her bluntness, spoke up. "Well," she said, dabbing at her eyes, "I feel like an idiot. Here I was thinking you were making do and you've been running half the town." I huffed a small laugh. Some of the tension at the table loosened. My mother reached across Jonah and placed her hand over mine. "I am so sorry, Daniel," she said, voice shaking. "For the things I said, for the times I brushed you off. I thought I was pushing you to do more, to aim higher. I didn't see I was stepping on you." Her fingers were warm. For all the time she'd annoyed me, worried over the wrong things, I knew that at her core, she did love us, even when she fumbled it. "I know," I said, "but from now on, I need you to hear me when I say I'm okay, that my choices are mine, that I'm not broken just because my path doesn't look like Josh's." She nodded quickly, tears spilling now. Of course, sweetheart." My father cleared his throat again, louder this time. When I looked at him, his face was strained, pride and something like shame wrestling there. "I was wrong," he said finally. The words sounded foreign in his mouth. About, about a lot. About what makes a man successful. I thought it was the title, the suit, the distance from where we came from. He looked around the restaurant, then at me. Clearly, I underestimated you. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that until it was there, hanging awkwardly between us. Thank you, I said quietly. Josh sat rigid, jaw working. Finally, he let out a breath, the fight going out of his shoulders. So what? Now you're, what? Better than me? He muttered. Because you own the building? I shook my head. That's not the point. I don't want to be better than you. I just want you to stop acting like you're better than me. He flinched. Then, to my surprise, he laughed. It was short and bitter, but real. God, you're infuriating, he said. You know that? Occupational hazard, I said. We deal with a lot of difficult tenants up there. Builds character. A few people chuckled nervously. The tension drained another notch. Josh scrubbed a hand over his face. For a moment, the polished facade cracked, and my kid brother peeked through. So, you really bought it? He asked, quieter now. All this? The food court, the movie theater, those creepy statues by the fountain? I smiled. The statues were the previous owner's idea. But yeah, it's mine, has been for a while. He looked down at his glass, then back up. I'm sorry, he said, the words coming out as if someone had dared him to say them. For the stuff I said, at the store, before. I don't know what I thought, that I had it all figured out because my business card has more syllables than yours. Turns out I've been strutting around a building my big brother owns, acting like I'm above him. Amelia slid her hand over his under the table, a silent nudge. Her eyes met mine, soft, a hint of apology there too. I forgive you, I said, but I'm not going to pretend it didn't hurt, and I'm not going to allow it to keep happening. So if you start down that road again, I'm walking out, mall owner or not. A ghost of a smirk tugged at his mouth. Yeah, he said, kinda hard to mock the guy who can raise your rent. There it was, the first joke tonight that didn't land like a blow. Don't tempt me, I said. Laughter rippled down the table. Real this time. Not forced. The atmosphere shifted. Not magically fixed, not suddenly perfect, but tilted onto a new axis. Dinner resumed. Conversations picked back up, a little more cautious around me at first, then gradually more natural. My aunt asked actual questions about what running a mall entailed. My cousin wanted to know if I dealt with Karens on a landlord level. Even my father listened as I talked about occupancy rates and event planning, the same way he'd listened to Josh talk about client portfolios. At one point, my mother reached over again and squeezed my arm. Next time, she whispered, if you do something crazy like buying a whole building, tell me. I may not understand right away, but I want to try. I nodded. That was all I'd needed back then, a willingness to try. By the time dessert came, the knot in my chest had loosened. The tiramisu tasted sweeter than it probably was. Josh stood again at the end of the meal, glass in hand. I braced myself. He began, glancing at me, then around the table, a little sheepish now. I want to revise my earlier toast. A few people laughed. To ambition, yes, he said, and to taking risks, but also to owning your choices, whether that's chasing a corner office downtown or walking the mall floor because you actually like talking to people who aren't on a conference call. His gaze met mine. To my brother, he added, who apparently is my landlord and also a bigger badass than I realized. May I never again underestimate the man in the polo shirt. The table chuckled and clapped. I shook my head, but I lifted my glass. After dinner, as people filtered out into the mall corridor, my father hung back. He looked around at the polished floors, the soft lighting, the crowd moving between stores. You did all this? He asked quietly. Kept this place alive? Not alone, I said. I've got a great team. But yeah, it was dying when I bought it. We turned it around. He nodded slowly. Your grandfather, he would have been proud. His voice caught. He liked big ideas, drove me crazy sometimes. Maybe I took the opposite road too hard. My throat tightened. I hope so, I said. I used his notebook more than any business textbook. He nodded again, then hesitated. Do you think you could show me one day? The upstairs? The real job? I smiled. For the first time, the office didn't feel like a bunker I had to hide in. It felt like a place I might actually invite someone into. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. They left eventually, drifting toward the parking garage in clumps, their silhouettes shrinking against the mall's glow. Josh slapped my back as he went, less force in it this time. Seriously, he said, if you ever need investment advice, probably you don't. He laughed awkwardly. But, congrats, landlord. Congrats, groom, I said. Try not to negotiate your marriage like a client contract. He laughed for real at that, Amelia rolling her eyes, and for a moment we were just brothers again, taking shots at each other without drawing blood. When they were gone, the mall settled back into its usual Saturday night rhythm. Teenagers loitered by the fountain. Someone at the arcade shouted over a jackpot. The air smelled like sugar and shampoo and 100 overlapping colognes. I walked down the second-floor corridor, my dress shoes clicking on the tile, and paused at the railing that overlooked the atrium. From up here, the place buzzed like a living organism. Lights, movement, hum. Penny for your thoughts? Lena appeared at my elbow, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. She held one out to me. Do you ever buy full price like a normal person? I asked, accepting it. Nope, perks of knowing the landlord. She bumped her shoulder lightly against mine. So, that went well, I snorted. Define well. No one threw a plate, she said. Your brother didn't storm out. Your mom didn't faint. By our family drama and a public venue standards, that's a win. I feel like I got hit by a truck and a therapist at the same time, I admitted. That's called growth, she said. You handled it. You didn't gloat. You didn't whip out bank statements. You just stated the truth and set a boundary. I stared down at the mosaic pattern in the atrium floor. I almost bailed, I said. When Marco walked up, my stomach dropped. Part of me wanted to pretend he had the wrong guy. But you didn't. She sipped her coffee. And now, they see you, the real you, not just the version they built in their heads. I exhaled slowly. The knot in my chest that had lived there for years was smaller. Not gone, maybe never gone, but loosened. I don't know if things will actually change, I said, or if in a month they'll rewrite the story and make this something else. Our quirky son, the landlord who still plays shop clerk for fun. Maybe, she said. People rewrite stories to protect themselves all the time, but you changed yours today. You said it out loud. That matters, even if they don't get all the way there. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the shoppers. A kid tugged his dad toward the toy store. A couple argued softly over which candle scent to buy. 2 teenage boys pretended not to notice the group of girls pretending not to notice them. My mall. My tenants. My chaos. If you ever get tired of double shifting, Lena said lightly, you know we can hire another floor rat. I hear the guy who owns the place is a pretty decent boss. I smiled. I'll think about it. The truth was, I probably would keep doing both. Not because I had anything to prove anymore, but because I liked the way it felt to scan a barcode and small talk with a stranger. To see kids grow from stroller to driver's license in the same building. To watch a worried small business owner light up when their weekend sales spike. Upstairs, the spreadsheets would keep humming. Downstairs, the folded jeans would keep needing straightening. And somewhere between those 2 floors, I had finally found my balance. As I headed back toward the service corridor, coffee warming my hand, my phone buzzed. A new message. From Josh. Sorry for being an ass all these years. Beer sometime? Your treat. Landlords are rich, right? I stared at it, then chuckled. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a novel-length apology, but it was a start. I typed back, first round's on me. After that, you're paying mall prices. He sent back a laughing emoji and a middle finger. I slid the phone into my pocket and pushed through the staff door, the hum of the mall dimming behind me. For years, I'd let other people narrate my life. Tonight, I'd taken the mic back. My brother had mocked me for working retail without knowing I owned the entire mall. My parents had measured my worth by the logo on my shirt. It would have been easy to stay hidden, to keep proving them wrong silently, to nurse the bitterness in private. Instead, I'd chosen something harder. I'd chosen to be seen. Not just as an owner or a landlord or a secret millionaire, but as myself, a man who liked calluses on his hands and balance sheets on his desk, who carried both a barcode scanner and a master key card, a man whose value didn't rise and fall with anyone else's approval. As the elevator doors closed, cutting off the view of the atrium, I caught my reflection in the brushed metal. Navy polo or suit, name tag or not, it was still me. For the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.